Hello, Opening Pathways viewers. This is Tom Lenoble. It's good to see you again. I have a great guest with me today, all the way from Melbourne, Australia. It's Germaine Symons. And Germaine, it's great to have you here today. Thank you for joining me on Opening Pathways.
Oh, Tom, thanks for having me. Yeah, really looking forward to spending some time with you.
I am too. Germaine is the Chief People Officer from a company that he's going to tell you a little bit about. And Germaine, as we get started, I'd love for you to share a little bit about that company and what you're doing. I'd also like to know what got you involved with it.
Absolutely. So, I work for a small boutique consultancy called Eight Squad, which we sort of launched about 6 years ago through a small acquisition. And a bit of a backstory: the CEO I actually worked with at a previous business called Blue Wolf, where we sort of partnered together to help scale that business. And he reached out to me and said, "Gee, would you come with me and help me do something similar?" And we joined forces and rebranded the business, got acquired, and launched Eight Squad 6 years ago now. It's been a fun journey. So. Yeah, I think it's a little bit about the background of that business, but I think for us, Tom, you know, we we really wanted to build more than just a Salesforce consulting business. I think while yes, we're a tech consulting firm and we're a services firm and we implement software, etc., I think for Frank and for myself, there was a couple things that really stood out that we wanted to build.
Good, good. I want to go back a little bit.
Yes.
I want to get a little bit more of the backstory, a little farther back. So maybe there was role models or something in your life, but what was it that propelled Germaine to take this path you're on?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a only child of sort of immigrant parents to Australia, two Sri Lankan parents who moved here when I was a baby, 15 months basically, and left a country that was going through some pretty serious sort of civil war at that time, and their I guess motivation was yes to find a better life for themselves, but I think also to give me as a young child a better opportunity. And to be honest, as I get older and I look at the sacrifices that my mum and my dad made in order to come to a country where I didn't really know that many people outside of a couple family members who'd moved here and leave a lot of comforts behind and essentially start from scratch and rebuild their lives. To be honest, Tom, that's kind of my inspiration. And I think since probably teenage years, there's definitely been this heart to sort of really showcase to mum and dad that their decision was worth it. And prove them right for being so brave and bold. Because I think for me, yeah, I'm never going to know something like that in my lifetime, Tom. So very, very grateful for them. And yeah, they're definitely probably the two standouts for me, Tom.
Yes, yes, yes. I often hear there's a parent or a grandparent when I ask that question of someone that had an influence over our lives. And it's always rewarding to hear what that story is. I want to talk a little bit about your leadership style. Was there a challenge you faced versus that as a leader that defined your leadership principles and style? And what is it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I've always probably been a pretty collaborative, I think, style leader, Tom. And I think many times, kind of through my professional journey, I've had people sort of say, "Oh, gee, you might need to get a bit tougher. You might need to get a bit harder, etc." And it's interesting, Tom, when you hear that, right? In that, I still think you can actually be firm and you can be tough, but you can still be kind, right? And I think that kindness comes through truth, right? And truth actually can be hard to deliver sometimes because it might not always land well. And so I think that's my leadership. If I look at my leadership style, it is very much a collaborative leader. I love my people to be coming on the journey with what we're trying to build. I love them to feel like they're released to not just have a voice, but to be able to take action, Tom. Um,
Yeah,
but equally, I think, when you need to be decisive, I think that's a really key factor as a leader that you see a path, you see an opportunity, you see something that's wrong, you need to be very quick and decisive to take that action. And that's something I've probably looked to refine over time, Tom, is trusting that gut and that instinct when you know there's a decision that needs to be made.
Yes, yes, we could all use a little more kindness today, without a doubt. It's such a simple concept, and there's no loss in being kind, in my opinion. I'm interested if someone was watching way back before all this happened, what would surprise them the most to see you today?
Yeah, geez, good question. Um, I feel like, from a pretty young age, Tom, my parents always sort of drilled into me responsibility, responsibility, to yourself, to others, that I think respect is a really big thing in a Sri Lankan culture as well to elders. And so I think I've kind of felt like I've always had that and probably been a little bit more mature than my age has probably belied from a pretty young age, whether it's stepping into leadership roles in sports when I played cricket and soccer or stepping into leadership roles at school, being a house captain and that sort of stuff. I think it's always kind of been there. I think one thing that may be surprising and probably surprises me and maybe others is creativity. I think if I look at myself and I think I look at my journey, I've probably never really looked at myself as the most creative person, Tom. But I think that was because of the lens that I looked at creativity through, right? Like for me, I looked at creative as, oh, these people, like my wife who's a songwriter, these people who can come up with lyrics and, these artists who can, just draw these wonderful paintings, etc. And that's creativity for me, right? But I think as I've grown up, I've realized no, creativity doesn't always look like that, right? Creativity can be in, your ability to approach a conversation and connect with someone, right? And how you do that, and how you understand that you need to turn up a little bit differently for every person that you turn up to, right? And you can be creative in that, in the way that you set up a people and culture business or a HR business. Actually, there's creativity in that as well. And so I think that's probably been a real evolution. And I think that would surprise some people. And I think the second for me is, as I alluded to earlier, Tom, because of that probably respect that, dynamic that I got taught. I was probably a little bit demure as a young man and as a teenager, etc. And I think maybe people would be a little bit surprised to see the confidence that's come and that I've grown into and probably been able to find my voice and myself, Tom.
Yes, yes. Listen up, viewers. I think we're going to hear some wisdom today, so let's pay attention. So tell me, what was the biggest turning point so far in the company?
Yeah. So I think, Tom, if I come back to the start, right, and I gave a little tidbit for this when we just kicked off this podcast, but while we wanted to launch a Salesforce consulting business for Frank and for myself, there's a couple of things that were really critical, Tom, from the get-go. And they were born out of some experiences for both of us, right? And one was we wanted to really take this path with holacracy as a key governance sort of structure in our business. And it got born out of for both of us the frustration with these typical linear management systems that we see in businesses, Tom. And I think when we look into these systems, they were built for me, my great grandparents' ages, right? In the, when you think about it, very much the manufacturing age, right? etc. And as we've seen workforces evolve and corporate evolve, we see the limitations to these linear management systems that rely on these convergent decision makers, Tom. And that's hence why we decided to pursue holacracy, right? And for us, a core tenet in this business was we didn't want decision making to be held up having to go through these processes, right? And if I share a little bit about that, I'd remember in previous businesses, Tom, as I'd come to you as my manager and you'd go, I'd have an idea and you go, Tom, you go, Tom, Germaine, that's a great idea. I love it, but let me go to my boss. And you'd go to your boss, Tom, would go to their boss, and we finally get to this central governor, partner, director, and they'd make the decision and filter down. But I remember sort of looking at that situation and thinking a couple of things really stood out. One, I'd see that process take 2 weeks, a month, 3 months, 4 months in a business for that decision-making tree to go up and come down. And I remember seeing the impact to people and going, wow, what a great way to disengage your frontline staff in your business. When they're coming, they're pouring their heart out, they're going, hey, I see this opportunity, I'm facing this challenge, but I've got something. And you're taking 4 weeks or 2 months or 3 months to come back to them. I think, two, the second thread for me was I'd see how that environment actually really increased this political environment where people would, through that chain, go, this is a great idea. I think this could help build some brand for me, right, in my career. And so I'm going to attach myself to this idea and maybe sprinkle a little bit of my own flavor as well, right, through that chain. And I'm going to use this, to build that relationship with this manager above me, right? And so you see this political environment play out. And I think the third part for me was these central decision makers, often highly intelligent, gifted people, Tom, but they're asked to make decisions on areas of the business they've never worked in, and nor do they have any expertise in. And that has a critical impact as well, right? And when you then think about modern businesses talking about, hey, we want our people to be empowered, we want them to have a voice, but if there's no ability to action the voice, well, then what's the point of the voice, right? And so this is what, for us, Holacracy was born out of. We wanted to make sure people had a clear process and system to not just voice something, but to actually be able to see it come to fruition live in the moment, right? And that was the beauty of Holacracy, is that we've been able to really distribute decision making and authority to the circles in this model. You know, allocate domains of ownership and to the experts that live there, and fully release them, right, to go and evolve and change this business. And so that, for us, from day dot, Tom, was a core tenet. And I think, like a lot of people who look to start companies and leaders and founders, etc., we maybe thought we could do it our way. And so we thought with Loxy, hey, we like these concepts, but maybe we can put our own spin on this, Tom. And it kind of worked for us for the first couple of years, as we went from, 15 people to 25 and 30 and 35. And then we very quickly realized this isn't working. If we're going to do this, we have to be all in. Um, and maybe we're not the smartest people in the room, and so we need to humble ourselves a little bit here and really go to some of the professionals. And so we partnered with Glass Frog and Holacracy One, and decided to be completely all in with, this is the way to do Holacracy. We're going to follow it to a T. And that was a really significant turning point
Good.
in the business, Tom. To come back to your question, where we just went, no, like, there is no more half measures. We're not going to partially do it our own way. If we're going to do this, it has to be 110%. And equally, Tom, we probably had to work through not just making that decision, but also with leaders in the business going, if leaders in the business don't want to be all in on this model, this might not be the right place as well for you, right?
Yeah.
And I think, for us, I really look back on that moment for Frank and for myself and for our business and go, wow, like, when we made that decision to be 110% in, it shifted our environment and our dynamic, and it really, galvanized our people behind something. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was a turning point for us, Tom.
Yes, that travel up that you described reminds me a bit of when we were kids and we had this game called telephone, where you leaned over and you told the next person something, and they told the next person, they told the next person, they told them, and finally the last person said what they heard. And it was
Yes,
never like what the first person said, much like what
correct.
you're describing. Someone has an idea, by the time it gets back to them, when it gets back to them, didn't quite sound like their idea often, right? So tell me this. I want to know, what did you learn about trust in the early days?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? I think when I look at that start of the business, as kind of leaders, you're such a small team, Tom. And so, as a small team, you play everywhere. Your hands are in everything. You're in every aspect of the business, connecting with every person, understanding what's going on. Um, and then you scale, right? And you go from 15 to 30 to 40 to 60, and we're now sort of a business of 100 plus people. And you start to realize this isn't very effective if I want to continue to hold on to all these parts, right? And cool, I know that I do some of these things really well, Tom, but if this business is going to go where it needs to go to, I've got to invest in the people that are going to take over some of these responsibilities. But B, I've got to trust them to do it their way, not my way. And that means I've got to understand who they are, I've got to understand their personality, and I've got to encourage their authenticity in how they approach these responsibilities and accountabilities. And that's hard, Tom, because, I think as you probably know, I'm a little bit of a perfectionist at times with how things have to run. And when I see people doing it a different way, you have that urge to go, oh, but if you do it like this, if you do it like that, but actually they're not you, they're them, And so I think that process of relinquishing and going, well, these are really important programs, I think especially for us, our talent acquisition process is a really important process in our business, right? And really critical to make sure we have people that align to our values, align to what we're trying to build beyond just being a consulting partner, and letting go of that, trusting people, to really drive that, to honor, what we've built and honor what we're looking for. Yeah, that's a real process. And you've got to really submerge that urge to go, hey, maybe do it this way. You've got to let people find their feet, Tom, and you've got to let people make mistakes, and you've got to let people fail as well. Um,
Yes.
and rather than telling them, it's actually going, hey, what did you become aware of through this, right? Letting them discover through questions that prompt rather than questions that give them the answer. And I think that's, again, probably been a massive lesson for me, Tom, is don't resort to rescuing and giving people the answer. Resort to how you challenge and coach people to discover the answers for themselves,
That's right.
right?
So tell me, Germaine, when the stakes are high, how do you make decisions?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm going to share something a little bit personal because I think it sort of ties in, Tom, to this process, right? I've had probably two major events in my personal life. One, I got diagnosed with Guillain-Barré going back 9 years ago now, where I was paralyzed from the waist down, including my arms. Spent 6 months in hospital, inpatient rehab. Got told, hey, look, we'll get you back to walking, but you may not play sport again. You may not do some of these things, that you did, which is pretty hard to hear as a 27, 28-year-old Tom.
Yes. Yeah.
And I remember going through this process and family and community coming around me. And long story short, about 4 weeks after I got released from inpatient, I ended up doing a 210K bike ride to raise funds for cancer. Um, and it taught me about the ability of mindset, the ability to be in a situation where you're being told, hey, some of these things that may be important to you may not happen again for you in life, right? And you may be severely limited. And I think the reason I share this story in particular is that it's really easy, Tom, when it comes to being in the heat of battle, to be really dictated to by voices and what they're saying. And, especially people who are more seasoned or maybe have, more years of experience in their career and have big personalities and voices. And it's a lot of information that comes to you as a leader, Tom, right? But what that process really taught me was, how do you still yourself and actually really trust your heart and your instinct, right? And I think, Tom, for me, going through that, and a second, sort of challenge that I had actually through the launching of this business was getting diagnosed with cancer. And for me, when I turn up to this business, what I realized, Tom, is no one's dying, and no one's got a terminal illness with the decisions we have to make. And so, as high pressure as it may be, as as answerable as you have to be to shareholders and a board, etc., it's actually not that big in the context of what's happening in the world and to people, Tom. And so for me, it's just taking that moment to go, you know what, remove the noise, still yourself, look at the question in front of you, look at the decision in front of you, and trust your instinct and heart to make that decision, but make it from a really still place. Don't make it from a noisy place, right?
Yes.
And don't allow pressure to dictate that you have to make that decision, maybe even in that particular moment, right? Sometimes actually the best decision is to go, I understand you need a decision, but I'm going to need an hour or two in order to make this decision really effectively, right? And giving yourself that permission and being really clear to other people that you're going to take that time is really important as well. So, yeah, it's a long-winded way to answer it, Tom, but
Yes.
Yeah.
I call some of these things that we learn from illness terrible gifts.
Yeah.
If you're open to it, there are gifts, but it's a terrible way to get a gift. But
Yeah.
a gift nonetheless that can change our lives and how we are present and operate going forward. So I'm curious, I look back and I think sometimes my biggest mistakes were my greatest teacher. In fact, sometimes those biggest mistakes is what propelled true success.
Yeah.
Have you ever had one of those mistakes that turned out to be a great
Yeah.
success in a later iteration?
Yeah. I think it's really interesting, Tom. Like, I think I don't necessarily go, oh wow, there was this huge moment where there was this massive mistake, but I think there's this accumulation of errors, right, and mistakes that kind of form you, right, and teach you a lesson. And I think again, I'd probably go back to some of my formative years, right, when you're a teenager and you're going through school, and I played sport and I had piano and I had school, etc. And you look at these things and you're sort of spreading yourself out, Tom, right? And I think one thing that I learned was spreading yourself thin is a really grave mistake, right? You really need to look at how am I spending my time? Where am I spending my time? Do I have the energy to sustain this? And if I make this choice, do I have the ability to turn up as 100% of myself, right? And I think I look at that through high school and then my 20s, where, to be really honest, Tom, I spread myself really thin and I made a lot of errors where I made myself really highly available for a lot of different communities, responsibilities, etc. And all I was doing was burning the candle, right? And causing damage to myself, and then not allowing myself to turn up as the best version of myself to any of them, actually, right? And I think, Tom, that for me was a really significant moment to go, I I've got to start getting better at saying no because I'm not that good at it. Um, and that has become a pretty seminal moment in my life, getting better at saying no.
Yeah.
And saying I can't do this because there's a real urge. And again, I think this comes from my culture of like, you don't want to let people down. You want to help them. You want to be there. You want to be present. But if you're actually not okay, you're not going to be able to help them and support them.
You know,
Right. And so,
I talk to many clients about the art of saying no.
yeah, it's just, it's such a powerful thing, and it kind of hurts my heart a little bit to say no to people, but I've realized, wow, it's actually there to their benefit and my benefit if I do, because then when I do turn up and I say yes, they're gonna get me at full value, right?
Mm.
Um, and that's better for everyone involved. So yeah, Tom, I think there have been my mistakes that I look back on and have learned from.
Good, good. Tell me, what values are non-negotiable in the company?
Yeah, I love this question, Tom. And I think we might go on a tangent here with this question as well, Tom. But for us, we've got three values, and one is absolute dedication to personal mastery. This for us, Tom, as a business, this got born out of the idea that there's a problem, and that problem in corporate is human erosion, Tom. And I think it's happening at the most rapid rate it's probably ever happened at. And yoga classes, dinners, well, good things, they're not going to fix it, Tom. And for us, it starts at education, right? And we wanted to be a business that really developed a program that enabled our people to grow as humans, right? And what we're very blessed with, our CEO, Frank Cooley, is a neurophysicist, and he had a clinic in Sydney, Australia, really helping patients, through really severe events. And we actually took his three systems model, which is built around the systems of knowledge, embodiment, belief, and built that into what we call our adaptive human framework program. And basically takes our staff through a journey, white to black belt across these systems, but across posture, movement, sleep, nutrition, time. And what we really wanted to do was how do we help build awareness through knowledge for our people, turn that knowledge into practice, embodiment, and then allow that practice and embodiment to impact people's belief systems, right? When they see, wow, I'm putting these nutrition plans in place, I'm putting this into my body. My goodness, look at my energy levels, right? Wow, I'm understanding sleep and my cycles and REM and non-REM and what that means for me, the environment I need to create for sleep. And that was our, answer to, hey, we wanted to provide an environment for people to live in to personal mastery because I think, Tom, even more so after COVID, this whole work-life balance is just life balance, working from home, working in the office. And so that was a real key value for us that we wanted to live into as a business and provide the opportunity for people to develop as humans and master themselves as humans, Tom, because if you're not okay as a person, you're probably not going to be okay at work.
True.
Um, and, I think if it sort of ties into our mission as for Frank and I from the day dot was when people come through this business, we wanted people to leave as better humans. And that's not better professionals or Salesforce professionals, as better humans. And this was
Mm.
our commitment to that. And equally what we ask from people is, do you have that commitment to learning and growth? So that's one non-negotiable value for us, Tom, that people have got to be committed to that growth and learning journey in this business and that mastery journey. The second is dedication to service excellence. And the obvious part that people look at in a services business is they go, oh, serve your customers, serve your partners. But for us internally, what it really meant, and this is a big one for me and my background, Tom, is to serve one another. Um, I'm a big, big believer in leadership starts with serving. You want to step into leadership, you got to start
Yes.
there. If you're wanting it for title, you're wanting it for brand, you're wanting it for image, authority, you started in the wrong place with leadership. And that's where it starts with. But equally, when you serve people, you're starting from a place of, I want to respect you and I want to honor you, right? And for me, that creates a really beautiful environment, whether in a home, in a community, in a business. And so that for us is a second non-negotiable. And the third is we before me, which, we have this kind of model tribal leadership we really believe in. Little shout out to John King, who's the author, and Frank and I know, who's based over in the US. And what that book talks to is at stage four, tribal leadership, you have this language and this culture of we, you know, um, where people have understood their own mastery, me, developed that mastery, stepped into I'm great, stage three tribal leadership, but have recognized that there's limitations to what I can achieve as an individual. And if I really want to truly achieve something special, that's got to be done as a team, as a collective. And so
Yeah.
I want to be in this language of how do I help we achieve this? What's my role in that, right? And that's a really key goal for us is achieving that culture and environment of we in this business. And yes, we want people to be their best versions of themselves, but then how do you take that into the collective, right?
Community.
So there are three non-negotiables, Tom. We hire based on it, and equally we've moved people on based on that as well, right? And it is the one for us. It's the one condition that we will be exclusive on, right?
Yeah,
If
yes.
people
I
can't,
love this idea of teams. I always have because I found that we can't do it all. And I find when you pull a team together and you let people do what's core to them, the team hums. But the next step of that I have found is once you build that and everybody's doing what's core to them and what they like to do, and the team is humming, I notice that people are then willing to stick their toe into something they did not think they could do. And they're willing to explore it, and things start cross-functionally happening, and people start learning from each other. It's a beautiful thing that I love about building teams. It's really great. So I have a question for you.
yes,
What are you most hopeful about for the world?
yeah. Wow, big question. Um, Tom, I think I come from a Christian background. My faith is pretty important to me, and I think at times what I feel I observe is there's this real need to be right, right about what I see, right about what I believe in, right about my political ideology, whatever it may be, Tom, right? I bet I need to be right. I have to be right about this, right? But I think for me, what's less important than being right is, and it's going to sound so cliche, is actually just going, I just want to be at peace with myself and with other people, right? And that's okay to discover that in any method that works for you, right? Whether that's meditation, whether that's religion, whatever it is, Tom, right? That works for you, right? But being at peace, finding that happiness, right? That for me, I think is my one wish for the world, that people find this inner peace in themselves and in their communities, and that they realize that, again, probably coming back to the previous question, that we're built for relationship and we're built for community and connection, right? And it's wonderful that you can achieve as an individual, but the most meaningful things we can do is our impacts on other humans, right? Because I think when our time comes, Tom, which it will come for all of us, it's not the businesses that we scaled, it's not the money that we made, it's not the cars, it's not any of that. It's the memories, right, that we've left on people and their hearts. And so, I think my one wish is that we can kind of remember that we are built for this relationship and community and connection, and come back to that as a world, this real community and connection, as humans, and look at how we help each other and ourselves find that peace and happiness, rather than needing to be right.
Yes, yes, yes.
So
Let's have a little unity
yeah, I think that's probably my heart, Tom.
about who's right or wrong. Let's just remember
No,
we're all human and we all really are more alike than we'll ever be different. What
exactly.
advice would you give an emerging leader? Somebody could be watching this and based on this podcast think, I think I want to aspire to follow a path and be able to lead. What piece of advice would you give someone thinking about starting on the journey?
Yeah, I think, Tom, again, I might go off on a little bit of a tangent, right? But we talk about this topic of diversity, Tom, right? And it's a really interesting topic. It gets promoted a lot, and equally, it then kind of comes into culture, right? And when I think about both these topics, and I've been through this journey myself on businesses where we want to be inclusive, we want people, to come into this business, etc. But then what we say is we have this culture in this business, and this culture is really hyper defined, Tom, right? But actually, when we unpack that, when you have such a defined culture, what you're saying is you kind of have a DNA of what a person needs to look like in order to come into this business, because you're very set on what this culture is, right? And that in itself actually stops diversity from happening, right? And you're actually excluding people because you're going, hey, if you don't fit into this DNA and this box of what a person needs to look like in our business, we might not be the right business, right? And this has been a real shift for me, Tom, when it came into the 8 Squad journey, was that from day dot, I was like, I never want to hear that someone's not a culture fit. It's just not an excuse anymore, right? If we're truly going to create divergent thinkers in this business, well, that means we need people with diversity of thought, experiences, backgrounds, etc., right? And that means, Tom, that I might not get along with you. I might not naturally vibe with you, but there's still incredible value to you and what you can bring to this business. And as long as you can opt into the values, which is the one thing we will exclude on, there's a place for you here, right? But your thoughts, what you look like, that doesn't matter, right? To us, what matters is that you have value, that you have skills. And I think when I bring this back to your question, my biggest advice is you don't always need to connect with people when you're looking to bring people into a business, when you're looking to scale business. In fact, actually embrace those that maybe you don't naturally connect with, right? Because what I love through this journey is that as we've brought this diversity of thought and experience into our business, the tension and the rub that you get between them and yourself, Tom, is what sparks that innovation and creativity in that business, what sparks that challenge. And that's been the best thing that's ever happened for me and for our business, And so I think my strong recommendation to leaders is surround yourself with people that are going to challenge you, and people that aren't going to be yes people and aren't going to naturally think the way you think, right? Yes, you need to have some common ground. I think that's where values is important, right? But don't look for that personality or cultural
Yes.
alignment, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I
That,
think
that tension and rub you speak to is how we get a pearl, you know.
spot on.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. I have one final question for you.
Yes.
If your younger self were to be watching this podcast, what would you tell him?
I tell him be braver and be bolder, Tom. I think the younger version of me, I think I alluded to it, a little bit younger, was probably very demure and lacked that courage, to really step into and go after what was on his heart, Tom. And I think my advice to my younger self would be bolder and stronger in your convictions, right? When you really have something you're passionate about, go and get after it. When you really believe in something, go and get after it. Don't just wait. Don't just sit there. Don't feel like you have to just be respectful of everyone else, etc. You can still be respectful, but you can still be bold. And I think that's what I'd say to my younger self, Tom.
Yes, Germaine, we might have to do a round two one day. Um, this is Germaine Symons. Germaine, it's been a delight to have you on the podcast. Please share with our viewers. Again, you're the Chief People Company. Share a little bit about your business and how they can find you if they're interested, please.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, as Tom said, I'm the Chief People Officer for 8 Squad. We're a Salesforce consulting firm based in Australia. We're in Melbourne, Sydney, Perth, Queensland, almost all across Australia. So, we've got a website, 8squad.com.au. You can check us out there, etc. We're on LinkedIn. You can find me. You can find our business on LinkedIn as well. And if you're looking for a Salesforce implementation, hit us up. We'd love to help you out in that space. And I think Tom, to you, I'd love to catch up again. It's been such a privilege to spend time with you, and hoping to spend time with you even outside of podcasts as well. It's
Be
been a lot of
great.
fun.
Thank you for being on Opening Pathways today.
Thank you, Tom. I really appreciate it.
Yes. And to my viewers, this is Opening Pathways with Tom Lenoble, and I'll see you next time.